The statistics are daunting. 1 in 60 of us suffer or lives with a brain injury or a brain disability. What if one of those people is a family member? Or what if the brain injury happened due to the result of someone else's carelessness? Well, here to give us an overview of brain injury law, Tom Sinas from Sinas Dramus Law Firm. Hi, Tom. How are you?
Hi, Todd. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Good. Sorry about that intro. My brain hiccuped on me a little bit, maybe. I got to be honest. I would think that a personal injury law deals with all types of injury, a lawyer such as yourself. What sets brain injury or brain disability claims apart from your standard personal injury?
You know, I think it has to do with just the incredible variation in the phrase brain injury. People can suffer brain injuries, of course, in a variety of ways, and that the injury itself can manifest itself in a whole variety of ways, different perhaps than any other injury to the body. So, someone, of course, can have a brain injury where they have sustained a fracture of their skull, or they can have a bleed in their brain, or they can have a brain injury that, as advanced as our modern technology isn't something that you can lay your eye on when you look at, say, a CT scan or an MRI. I mean, if you just think about how much general understanding we all have developed in the last 10 years as we see the science coming out of what happens to athletes, and understanding now that the being exposed to repetitive head injuries can cause its own form of a brain injury, it really speaks to just how little perhaps we really know and how complicated and unique a brain injury is, in a way that I do think is fair to say is different than really any part of the body. And so an injury to that part of the body in the context of a personal injury case, just by definition, makes that personal injury case very different.
You used words like complicated and unique. So I'm assuming these cases are different than other personal injury law cases.
They are. I mean, there are a lot of things about them that are the same in terms of some of the legal concepts that apply across personal injury cases. But I think they're different in one important respect, and that really is the role of medical evidence and medical testimony in the case. You're of course, not only dealing with physicians who treat brain injuries, but you're dealing with a whole continuum of specialized therapists, psychologists, neuropsychologists, people who have a special discipline in the diagnosis and treatment of brain injury. And their role in the case is so important because they are the ones who can speak to the nature of the brain injury in that particular person, how it is that we can know and understand what parts of the brain have been affected, and then what does the future hold for that particular person and that particular brain injury. This is a much more complicated analysis, I think it's fair to say, than a case involving, and this isn't to say these aren't serious, but a case involving, say, orthopedic injuries. And so I think in a brain injury case, it is more complicated because you have just a much wider field of people involved and a wider range of data that has to be considered.
You mentioned sports. That's one way we've all heard about the concussion news over the past few years. But what about car crashes? I mean, that seems to be what people think of maybe sometimes when they think of a brain injury. Somebody got into a car crash, smacked their head on a window. Are those different? How does the law apply to those?
They are different. Of course, car crashes are a very common way for someone to sustain a brain injury. It could be the way that you just described. It also can happen, of course, when the head doesn't strike anything. The force of impact on the car and on the body, of course, creates a force of impact within the skull. And our brain sits delicately in this fluid inside of our skull. And so a high impact event like a car crash very commonly can result in a brain injury. And in Michigan, when it comes to auto laws, you and I have talked in the past about the fact that we have this concept known as a threshold injury, meaning that the victim has to be able to prove that they have a certain serious injury in order to get over this threshold and be able to present their case to a jury and not have their case dismissed in court. Well, we have a special rule in brain injury cases for auto accidents in Michigan. And it says that the victim can get over that threshold, can get their case to a jury trial if a physician an MD or a DO who regularly diagnoses and treats closed head injuries, testifies under oath that there may have been a serious neurological injury. That's the verbatim language, which speaks to the point we just talked about before, the role of medical testimony in the case, the role of understanding how all of that relates to this one particular person, and the important role that specialized medical providers play in auto accident cases when it comes to the legal rights of the victim.
Well, when it comes to the legal rights of victims, no better place than Sinas Dramus Law Firm. Where can we get a hold of you?
Well, they can find us online at www.sinusdramus.com. They can shoot us an email at info@sinusdramus.com, or they can give us a call in West Michigan at 616-301-3333. I also recommend, there's a lot of good information out there put out by the Brain Injury Association of America and the Brain Injury Association of Michigan.